It's official, there's a new game in town. Seattle has just scored the latest NHL franchise, and hockey fans can't wait for games in 2021 in a newly rebuilt arena.
Let's go hockey, right?
It's a big statement, a huge milestone, and I'm celebrating the win.
But after years of planning, is the city ready for 18 hours of construction a day at the Seattle Center and its surrounding neighborhoods?
It's no secret. Mobility is a challenge in Seattle.
It's in the best interest, I think, of the politicians here and the taxpayers that they get this thing up and started.
How will a major arena renovation and a new hockey team impact our city?
That'll be a tremendous asset.
Our studio panel weighs in.
It's really important that the community stay at the table all the way through here.
Developers and neighborhood advocates take center ice next on City Inside Out. Welcome to this edition of City Inside Out. I'm your host, Brian Callanan. The National Hockey League has just announced that Seattle will be granted a new franchise, a team that will begin to play in 2021. It's a year later than fans and the city had hoped, but that's just one of the many hurdles involved before Seattle gets its first taste of pro hockey in nearly a century. There's an aggressive rebuilding schedule for KeyArena, traffic congestion and business concerns inside Seattle Center, even a labor contract for the NHL to consider. So while it is time to celebrate bringing a new team to Seattle, pro hockey dreams are still on ice for a few years as the process of building a new sports franchise gets underway.
A National Hockey League team to Seattle.
For the first time in 94 years, Seattle will have a professional hockey team.
Release the Kraken!
Well, there's no mascot yet for the 32nd National Hockey League franchise, but that doesn't stop fans like Max Rubin from gushing about it.
I moved here from New York, and I thought New York was a sports town. Seattle is above and beyond blows it out of the water.
The league says a Seattle team will hit the ice in 2021, a year later than investors from OVG, the Oakview Group, were aiming for, with their aggressive renovation schedule for KeyArena.
I think the construction process is very, very important.
Mike McQuaid is transportation chair for the South Lake Union Community Council. He also serves on the city's KeyArena Redevelopment Advisory Group.
Yeah, it's a lifelong dream.
A big fan himself, dating back to the Seattle Totems of the Pacific Coast Hockey League from 44 to 74. McQuaid says Seattle has always had a strong love of hockey, but a lot has changed.
The difference is we now have 50,000 people living and working in South Lake Union that weren't there before.
It was a labor of love, but it was well worth it.
And unlike other sports franchise deals in the past, Seattle now has an investment group willing to put in $700 million all-private dollars to build a new arena, including $40 million for transportation projects around Seattle Center.
This is about getting Seattle back on track, and mobility is at the heart and soul of everything that you do as a city.
OVG and the city are still working on where and how those transportation dollars would be spent, as well as other details of a substantial public benefits package. No! But McQuaid points out, OVG has already scored some wins. There's a new 3-rink practice facility planned for Northgate, 32,000 season ticket deposits, and perhaps most importantly, no community groups have made legal challenges to the arena project.
It's really about dialogue, it's about respect, it's about working together to grow Seattle, and that's our Seattle.
For a business perspective on what a remodeled arena might mean for our region, take a look up. 605 feet up, to be exact.
We love being in the Seattle Center campus. We love kind of representing the city.
That's Karen Olson, Chief Marketing Officer for the Space Needle, which remained open during its own $100 million remodel starting in 2017.
Construction's construction, so it's pretty disruptive.
The 30 different organizations on the Seattle Center campus will feel an impact with the multi-year construction process ahead. But just like the view through the new glass floor at the top of the Needle, Olson says it's clear. This project revolves around the city and OVG working to help all the stakeholders involved.
They've done a lot with transportation. They've done a lot with impact to the community surrounding. They've done a lot of work with all the resident partners about what happens during construction, what happens after construction. But once it's done, we'll have this amazing venue for the next 50 years.
But first, the next 2 years. Why can't the NHL hit the ice in Seattle in 2020 as investors plan?
They're going to talk about it being about the arena, but it's as much about the labor situation as anything else.
Geoff Baker is a sports reporter for the Seattle Times, who points out the NHL's collective bargaining agreement is up in 2 years.
If they have a lockout situation in September of 2020, which is a very real possibility, then you can't launch a team here in Seattle in October of 2020.
Regardless, the league is still collecting an expansion fee from the Seattle ownership group.
It doesn't mean much to the NHL. They're still going to get their $650 million.
But now those owners and a city anxious for the added economic impact of a new team will have to wait one more year.
It's in the best interest, I think, of the politicians here and the taxpayers that they get this thing up and started.
The most important thing is we've got it right and we're invested in the community.
Mayor Jenny Durkan says if the new arena opens as planned in 2020, it would still host major musical acts and hot local events other than hockey.
They wanted to open not on the road but for the fans. And the worst case scenario, the storm, the championship storm opens in the arena. I think it's going to be amazing.
Amazing and maybe a preview of what it would mean to bring the Seattle Sonics back home?
The NBA will figure out how a team is going to come back here. All we can do is create the right environment, and I'm going to be a part of that.
One dream at a time, says Brian Robinson of Sonics Rising. But with a new hockey team in town, it's a dream getting closer to reality. And joining us to discuss this issue further, we have with us Steve Mattson. He is with the Oakview Group, the Director of Operations for the new arena at Seattle Center. Steve, good to have you.
Good morning.
We also have with us Robert Nellams, the Director of Seattle Center. Robert, good to have you too.
Good morning.
And with us, Debbie Frausto with the Uptown Alliance neighborhood on the executive committee with that group. She also serves on the city's arena advisory group. Debbie, good to have you too.
Thank you.
And finally, Chris Daniels, a chief reporter from King 5 News. He just shows up when anyone says new arena, so we thought we'd have him in here. Chris, thank you for your insight. I really appreciate you being here. Steve, I'll start with you. Fans have been going crazy, especially over the last couple of days, regarding the announcement that the National Hockey League is coming to Seattle to play at Seattle Center. What are you most excited about with this?
I think it is for the fans. I mean, I think there's dual purpose here. There's the ability to give the fans a team, a fresh team, help own this team, whether it's coloring it, branding it. There's no strings attached. This is not somebody else's team that's been cast to us. I think, but also the building that is the market's been needing to refresh, and I think to give them a first-class, world-class building for that team and all the other events.
Yeah, that's a big part of the two big parts of it. Robert, I'll head to you next. This is literally a game changer for Seattle Center. How would you describe how all the organizations, 30 of them, on that 74-acre campus are taking this news?
Well, I think the resident organizations are looking at the opportunity to work with Oakview Group on a long-term basis. I think there's some trepidation about construction and so forth. That's just normal, natural, and what have you. But we're kind of looking beyond that, because the real gist of this is what are the partnerships and what are the relationships and what are the things that can be built going forward once the arena opens. There's going to be a little bit of pain initially for a lot of gain for the long term.
Okay, thank you for that. Debbie, to you next. I know it's an exciting time for neighborhood groups around the arena like yours. So new life definitely coming back to that area. Tell us your reaction to hearing the news that the NHL has finalized this deal with Seattle.
Well, it's very exciting. Personally, I'm a hockey fan, so I'm excited about
she's
that.
Got her button on. Yep.
I've got my button and my deposits in.
Yeah, right.
But from the community standpoint, we've always been working with Robert about how to break down the porosity between the community and Seattle Center. And the arena is going to give us a great opportunity to really mesh and let people understand that this is all happening in a neighborhood called Uptown. So very exciting time for us.
Chris, you've been covering this for many, many years. This is a saga that to bring a pro sports team here, basically. It's been going on for many, many years to build a new arena too. Your opening thoughts about what it means to have a new NHL team here?
I think I've made the joke over and over that I've been a beat reporter for a non-existent building and two non-existent teams.
Yeah, right.
And within 24 hours, two of those three things were accomplished. It's nice to have an end to the story. I think there is local leadership like Robert in particular that really deserves a lot of credit here. I don't think people quite realize what Robert has accomplished in about a decade. He's handled the biggest makeover of Seattle Center since the 1962 World's Fair in terms of Chihuly and the Space Needle and the Opera House and McCaw Hall and all that. I mean, there's a lot going on, and I think that there are people in this city who can applaud that. And I'm just happy that finally, after all these years and all these stops and starts and telling people something might happen and possibly could happen, that it's happening.
Great to hear. Let's dive into some of the details here. Steve, I'll start with you. In terms of when a team would hit the ice, I know OVG was pushing for that 2020 season. The NHL says 2021. A few different factors here. Arena construction could be part of this. Geoff Baker in our setup piece brought out the NHL's collective bargaining agreement. How will starting hockey a year later than you wanted to affect OVG and an ownership group that I would think would want to get this thing rolling as soon as possible?
Yeah, I think it's important there to know that it's a year for a year delay, if you want to use that for the team, but it's probably 5 or 6 months for the building. So this is not a wait till the fall of 21 to open. And for us, it's got to happen as soon as we can. I mean, the construction starts, the debt starts, with the bottom line better start. So I think we've got to get events happening in there as fast as we can, ideally in the spring of 21, several months in advance of the franchise opener.
Got it. And this idea that, I know you were talking about a pretty aggressive schedule, 18-hour workdays and all that, that still holds true, it sounds like.
Yeah, we really can't take the gas off here. And I think, you could take Jeff's comments towards labor, but frankly, on a construction end, I think despite meeting a lot of what seemed to be insurmountable deadlines over these last couple of years, I think in the end, we could not find a way to do 24 or 26 months of construction in 22 months to get it open in the fall of 20.
Okay,
that's what it came down to. Do it right. To get this thing really done right, it was going to take longer.
And importantly, too, the team is going to be able to start at home, I think, in 2021 is the whole idea. That's going to be a big one.
Yes.
Robert, I'll head to you. Tell us about how bringing in hockey a year later might change the equation at Seattle Center. It sounds like the new arena is going to still have these live shows, could have the Storm, as Mayor Durkan brought up there. But until 2021, no NHL, which could potentially be the biggest draw for crowds. Tell us about this slight delay we're talking about.
It is a slight delay. It could have some implications and so forth, but the reality is hockey, they're the primary tenant and so forth, but they're 20% of the events that's going to occur there. The other 80% of events can start when the building opens, and so that is going to be the let's say the elixir that comes into Seattle Center and help fuel some of the growth and some of the things that are going on. I think people sometimes get confused a little bit about, okay, the hockey is not going to happen until October 2021, so nothing's happening there. That's not the case.
I wanted to make sure we were clear on that.
Yeah, we're very clear on that. So once the building opens, Steve will be on the hook to be bringing in a lot of things, and they have some great partners that are going to help them do that with Live Nation and others who are going to bring concerts and events and other things that are happening or that will happen there. And so we're very excited once it starts to see that the new building just open and start just impressing the entire community.
Debbie, your thoughts about this? I'm wondering what it would mean to have hockey a year later. Maybe it helps the neighborhood get used to what's going on there. There will be live shows, etc. What do you think?
Yeah, there's pluses and minuses on both sides. We want to get through the painfulness of construction as quickly as possible. On the other hand, the construction time gives us a chance to get people to think about how to get to Seattle Center and to the neighborhoods and different venues. Maybe not drive a car all the time, take the monorail more often, get used to the bus systems. So it's actually a time to start changing how people arrive into Uptown and come and go there. And that's a really important time frame to change people's behavior, because when hockey gets here, we want as few cars as possible circling the neighborhood here. So it's a really good opportunity through that. And let's not forget, some people think construction is exciting. So there's, I mean,
people will be able to see it. That's right.
People will be able to see it, and I hope with OVG and Seattle Center, there's a real marketing effort here to get people to enjoy the construction and not just look at it as a hassle through the process.
Thank you for not bringing down the viaduct. That's a whole other show. Make sure you watch that on Seattle Channel. It's an important one too. Easy.
So
take it easy. One at a time. Chris, I wanted to talk about this piece of it. The new arena is a privately funded facility. Very important piece of this. But having an NHL team is a huge economic driver. So this new arena deal says any revenue above $5 million would be split between ArenaCo and the city, 75-25 for the first 10 years, then 50-50 after that. I know waiting another year for the NHL might mean some missed revenue for the city of Seattle. Any thoughts on waiting a year on this?
Yeah, as far as waiting a year, I don't know about the economics of it, but just to speak to what Debbie's talking about with construction, I think Tim Lewicki has said now at the groundbreaking that he believes they can open in April or May, and that also there will be a foot off the gas, so to speak, in the construction. Not as many triple shifts, not as many community impacts. That's a good thing. And I think that there is a silver lining for the city of Seattle in the plans post-viaduct. I know you don't want to talk about the viaduct,
no, we have to.
but when it goes away, when that tunnel goes away, that will also mean the Battery Street Tunnel goes away. That means the barrier between South Lake Union and Seattle Center goes away, and there will be 3 through streets, Harrison, John, and Thomas. SDOT has told me earlier this month that's going to take 24 months to complete. So that means that should be done in time for the opening of the arena. So there's a silver lining, I think, here for the city of Seattle in terms of transportation mitigation, getting people from South Lake Union to the new
Could be a
arena.
10-minute walk from there. Robert, you wanted to weigh in.
Well, just a quick thing. In the agreement that was done with Oakview Group, the city and Oakview, we anticipated that there may be some potential for delay or whatever. We always hate to use that word, but revenues weren't going to start to come until 30 months after the agreement was
finalized.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that up. I wanted to make sure we dove into that detail because some people were asking me about that delay of a year. But Steve, I want to dive into some of the details of the many public benefits that will come from this arena deal. There's money for affordable housing, homeless youth, public art. There's a labor agreement for construction workers there too. I want to focus on one of the biggest public benefits that I've heard a lot of questions about, $40 million for a transportation improvement fund. Where's that money going to go? Who are you working with? What's going to happen with that?
Well, I don't think we'd say conclusively where it's all going to go, but we think it's going to be, in some way sprinkled across a lot of places. Debbie talks about a few of those things. I think our goal really there was we need to be a part of it. We can't solve Seattle traffic issues in and of ourselves, but we have to be a part of it because of what we're doing. And I think part of it is the right thing to do for a development of this nature that's going to bring in up to 2 million people a year, and add that to that campus and the surrounding area. So I think we're working with SDOT, WashDOT, community groups, and hearing right now. And listening. We had certainly elements of part of our process where we had to get into hypothetical plans, and every year we need to do an AMP plan, an arena access management plan.
I gotcha.
It's got to be updated every year. So it's going to be a living, breathing document of us of how we evolve with helping, not just through construction, but once we're up and running.
And Debbie, this interacts directly with your group.
It does. And one of the things in your opening piece, Mike McQuaid spoke to transportation as well. One thing Uptown Alliance did is we brought together South Lake Union, Belltown, and Uptown early on in this process. And we asked for some funding, which OVG did fund for what's called the Mobility Action Plan. And that is a lot of the small projects that Steve mentioned about being sprinkled around that the community says needs to happen. And the $40 million, it's $1 million a year, though the city is looking at bonding around some of it so it can be used for some bigger chunks of things. So that final report of the top tier projects is expected out any time now for that. And I think that money is being looked at as possible to be applied to some of these projects that will really impact Uptown immediately in the connection between the 3 communities.
And I know Uptown itself will be getting $225,000 to help with businesses or whatever else. Tell me about that. Where's that money going?
We're very excited. It was part of the community benefits agreement that was, we all were in for very many years of discussing along here. But through that, OVG is funding $75,000 a year for 3 years to help in what we call organizational capacity building. Uptown Alliance and the Uptown Arts and Culture Coalition, we're all volunteers. So we're kind of maxed out with between the projects that the city keeps throwing at us, we're kind of maxed out here. So we have hired now a consulting firm. I'll say we're in negotiations with them, but we picked one through a large process. And they will help us build our database on our small businesses. They're going to help on communications along with Seattle Center and Oakview. We hope to be invited pretty soon to construction meetings and marketing meetings, and we'll have somebody there to represent the community and interact between the businesses and all of these different processes that go on.
It wouldn't be Seattle without a good process.
It wouldn't be Seattle without a good process.
Yeah, the Seattle process. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Double check.
Oh boy. Oh boy. We'll get back to that. We'll get back to that. Robert, I want to talk about this integration agreement that's part of this new arena deal. It has Seattle working very closely with the OVG on transportation, marketing, sponsorship, several other big issues. Tell me about that partnership. What does that mean? Are things going to be changing at Seattle Center? What's it going to look like?
Yeah, one of the things, there were 3 major agreements with the transaction documents. The lease was really about what are the legal issues to deal with. You had a development agreement that dealt with the construction. The integration agreement is really about how will Oakview Group, the arena, NHL hockey, and Seattle Center coexist throughout the lease. And so it's about operations, it's about communications, it's about working together. And one of the major changes that we'll have, and my hope is that it won't be so major that people say, oh, this is something, is we've turned over our sponsorship rights to Oakview Group, because they're going to be able to deal with the arena and what happens at Seattle Center as a one package, as opposed, I always tell people, sponsorship is not something government does well. Even though we were successful at it, we couldn't do a lot of the things that they will be able to do in terms of getting national and regional sponsors in to help pay for the things that happen at Seattle Center.
Yeah, this is a big piece of it. Steve, just a quick one on that. Your thoughts about that sponsorship part?
Yeah, you can imagine. So what is an $800 million or so arena and a $650 million team. This investment is, and you need some revenues to pay for it. And sponsorship is absolutely one of them, from naming rights, founding partners on down. And a lot of dialogues already been underway over this last year. The ability to take and go outside of the lease lines and to be able to get to the campus, it's a tremendous asset for us, and hopefully for the city too, because there's a sharing revenue relationship there for both.
That's a big deal. Thank you for helping me with that piece. Chris, I wanted to head to you. I saw 2 very telling signs over the past year. 1, 32,000 people signing up for season tickets, and 2, no lawsuits filed by a community, a couple of them, a couple season ticket holders potentially right here. No lawsuits filed by community groups against this project, but it happens a lot in this town too. What's going to take to keep that enthusiasm, that public support going over the next 2+ years until we get shows there, hockey there, et cetera? What do you think?
I think the piece, whenever Jerry Bruckheimer jumps off the top of KeyArena and the explosions go off and they have the name and the mascot, maybe the Kraken gets released or something, that will be excitement, I think, for all the fans. I think the 33,000 season ticket deposits was a huge selling point to the NHL, that this actually is a hockey town. I think there had been questions in the last couple of years about, yes, there's minor league hockey, but how does that translate to National Hockey League, and whether people are willing to pay that kind of money for tickets. I think that is a huge driver, and it's up to Oakview and NHL Seattle to kind of give some cookies along the way to keep people interested for the next 2.5 years. And I think that's part of where the team name comes in, and the T-shirts and the slogans and the colors and all of that kind of stuff. Once that is unveiled, the T-shirts and the hats and the sweaters will start popping up around town, and I think you'll see a lot of people get excited before the puck drops for the first time.
Yeah, if I could add too, I think the Northgate practice facility, which by putting 3 sheets of ice in Seattle proper, that's a tremendous community benefit. But I think we'll use that as another one of these to get done. A little bit longer time to get it done now, but also that'll be a tremendous asset.
It'll be huge. And Steve, I want to jump in because we're starting to wrap up here. Hold that thought for 1 second, Debbie. How does bringing an NHL team here impact the quest for an NBA franchise? I know you worked at the Target Center with the Timberwolves there, brought that team, well, you didn't bring them there, but they got there to the playoffs for 8 straight years. Will Seattle be able to land an NBA team here? How does this affect this?
I think we've been using the line. I think it's totally appropriate that we think this paves the way. Every move we've made related to the facility and related to NHL has been watched closely by the NBA. We know that communication's ongoing. But that team has an even number of teams. This league did not. And I think in some ways the market is fortunate that there's no, this is not an NHL team that is coming back that's been lost. It's a brand new team to own. I think who knows how that happens in the future, whether it's expansion or somebody else's market that didn't work.
Right.
But that could be an interesting reversal of Seattle if that happens.
Yeah, we will see what happens there.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that piece to it. Robert, looking ahead, what would it mean to bring an NBA team back to Seattle Center? You've seen it before. Could we see it again? Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, you know, as a native and a Sonics fan, it would be kind of completing the circle. Being the director of Seattle Center when the Sonics left is still a kind of a hole in my soul. And so to have that refilled would be a wonderful thing. Yeah. There's passionate fans in this community, and Sonics meant something and still do mean something for the people who live and work here.
Yeah, thank you for that. Debbie, I know it's one team at a time here, but I just wanted to talk about your thoughts about adding another team and moving ahead. What do you want OVG city leaders to keep in mind as this project's moving forward?
I think we've said from the beginning, and to relate back to your question to Chris there a moment ago, the community was at the table in the very beginning, and it's really important that the community stay at the table all the way through here, because while it's KeyArena and it's Seattle Center, it is in Uptown. And so we want to see that Uptown logo and name on everything just as much as anything else in here. And we've been through the Sonics, and we've been through when highest and best use of land was parking lots. We've changed as a neighborhood. So dealing with the traffic and the transportation weighs heavy on the residents who live here. And the more we can get to having choices for how people change here, the better people's going to love that happening in their backyard or their front yard as it is.
Okay.
So it's that communication that needs to stay.
Thank you for that. Chris, Sonics, you've been covering this for so long. Any ideas there? Expansion, I know, isn't really on the table for the NBA right now. Your thoughts about this in the future?
I think we're still a few years away from the Sonics, and I think as we talk about this story with a new arena and a new team, there will be people who will say the story isn't over until the Sonics are back in Seattle, wherever that may be.
Okay, well, we'll see where that happens. Yeah. I'm going to wrap up by asking lightning round question here. Chris, I'll start with you and head down the line. Your suggestion for a team name and a one-sentence explanation why. Go.
Steelheads, because it's strong, the men of steel.
I love it.
There's a lot that you can do with the color scheme, too.
Debbie, what do you got?
I'll do the Cascades.
Okay, Cascades sounds good. What do you got?
I stole it from you.
You stole mine. I shouldn't have said that earlier.
But it was what's in my brain.
The totems.
Totems.
For history.
A lot of history there, too.
I'm a bit inside, so I'm going to abstain on a name, but I'll say something water-related.
Okay. Ooh, okay. Now we know. Thank you all. Thank you all
for a tease.
I love it. I love it. Well, we will definitely be back on it. Thank you all for your input on this, and we will be right back.
I think it's great. Yeah, I love hockey.
I would like to see a hockey team in Seattle.
Mercer they've improved it, but now they've added a lot more traffic.
Traffic is bad enough already.
We'd like to know what you think. Send us an email at contact@seattlechannel.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter and give us your feedback.
Before we close today, it's time for our weekly CIO poll. Are you excited about pro hockey returning to Seattle? Yes, no, or are you undecided? We want to know what you think. Cast your vote and send us your comments at our website, seattlechanel.org/cityinsideout. While you're there, you can watch our programs online anytime. Coming up next week, helping the homeless. At last count, more than 12,000 people a night are living outside or in shelters in King County. Yet even as millions of dollars are being spent each year, those numbers are increasing. Leaders say a regional approach is the answer. But what will that take? We get some answers next time on City Inside Out. I hope you join us.